Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Walters, and this is another Experience Investigators Ask Me Anything session. And this time we're doing things a little bit differently. But before I jump into that, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeannie Walters, and I am founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. We help CX leaders really become more empowered to deliver great experiences through training, workshops, speaking, as well as consulting around things like journey mapping and service blueprinting and helping you build your CX team. So if you want to reach out, we love hearing from you. Here are all the different ways. And if you haven't yet signed up for yearofcx.com at yearofcx.com, I encourage you to do that to receive some of the resources that we'll be talking about today. So a few weeks ago, we actually started talking about three of the very important factors around customer experience, what I really believe customer experience is. And that's the three ideas of it being a mindset, a strategy, and a business discipline. And then we walked through a little bit of what that means. Today, what we wanted to do is really highlight some of the amazing questions that our community brings to our live sessions almost every week. And throughout those questions, that's what really drives us to understand what is most important to you as CX leaders. By answering these questions, it also helps us understand what content you want to see. What do you want us to write about more? What do you want these videos to be about? And so today we wanted to highlight some of the greatest hits, if you will, of those questions that really dive into those three ideas of mindset, strategy, and business discipline. So let's get started. Now, the first thing that we want to talk about is customer experience as a mindset and why that's so important. Now, in any organization, sometimes customer experience as a phrase is tossed around, but it might be defined differently from one person or one department to another. It's so important to get alignment on this. And when we're talking about customer experience mindset, we're really talking about how it impacts culture, how it impacts cross functional leadership, how it impacts building coalitions and the role of CX leaders throughout your organization. So, as you consider that for your customer experience mission, realize that it's all about that North Star, making sure everybody has the right mindset to set you up for success. We had some great questions around this very topic.
Well, let's start out with a question that came in from the community earlier this week. It's all about CX buy-in. So this question says, our C-suite has added 4 new executives in the past 2 years. How do you make sure that the entire executive team is on board with your CX objectives?
Great question. Yeah, the C-suite is expanding. My favorite example of this is, and I've talked about this before, but the client who had a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, a chief information security officer, and a chief data officer. And so instead of having, the traditional kind of CTO role, they had expanded that. That is happening over and over again. Now we have chief revenue officers, we have chief HR, we have chief learning and development, sometimes all sorts of things. So I think that this is absolutely critical for the CEO to take on, frankly. I think the CEO has to be leading with this message that this is really, really important to us. And as part of onboarding for anybody, talk about that, educate about that, talk about what is the definition here for customer experience success, and then keep talking about it. This is where I think I see the most disconnect. We talk about customer experience as if it's a thing that we should just do, that is just going to happen. But customer experience requires strategy and management and discipline, just like any other part of the business. So if you don't have a chief customer officer or a chief experience officer in that C-suite, that's sending a message too. So we need to make sure that the C-suite is built in a way that respects that customer experience is super important. And we need everybody to be in line with that because they're the ones who will be holding others accountable for this type of education, for this type of the outcomes that we're looking for. So it's really important to tie things back to this is who we are, but also this means success. This is what we're doing as a business. So we have something called the customer experience success statement. And that has helped a lot of leaders understand that when we are successful at customer experience, we actually get those business outcomes that we're looking for. And we have a free workbook there that David dropped in. And really, that's about breaking down your organizational roles, your leadership, or your organizational goals, I should say, and your leadership goals, and then figuring out, how do we measure success here? How do we know if the customer experience that we're delivering is moving the needle forward, not just in the CX metric, but also in our organizational goals as well? If you're talking like that, that gets people's attention a lot more. So, with that and with ongoing communication, ongoing education, that can be a great way to do it. The other thing is, the C suite is a great place to start talking about who knows about a customer experience mission moment. How did we live up to that? How did we not live up to that? Every time you have a meeting, you can trade that responsibility around. You can rotate that. So one week, the chief revenue officer is responsible for sourcing one of those stories and finding it. One week, it might be your chief technology officer. It's amazing when you ask them to connect those dots, they start really emotionally connecting with what's happening day to day with your customers, which is essentially the goal that we want, because humans are not moved by metrics. Humans are moved by emotion. And the only way you can get the C suite to really care is if they really care. And so that means connecting with them emotionally about these customer stories. That was a long answer. There's a lot to say there.
I think it was a great answer, though. So I have a question as we talk about how things are connected. We've talked a lot about employee experience, and we have a resource related to that. We've got an employee experience or an employee journey mapping workbook that we've released. We talk a lot, of course, about customer experience. How do those things directly relate to one another?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this came up a lot recently. Actually, I think a lot of organizations are really thinking about this in bigger ways, because there is no other. I mean, there's no bigger driver, I should say, to your customer experience than your employees. I mean, think about it. Who is going to deliver the customer experience? Your employees, both the ones who are customer facing as well as the ones who are providing all of the processes and resources and tools and everything else that, goes through either other employees or gets distributed to your customers. Every single employee has an impact on your customer experience. So starting there, one of the things that I'm a big believer in is that if we promise a certain customer experience, if we go out there as a brand and say, this is who we are, this is what you can expect from us, we better be living that inside our organization as well. Because if that's misaligned, what happens is employees start recognizing that. They start saying, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. How come we say that we have to respond to a customer right away, but I have to wait for my colleague to get back to me whenever they feel like it because I'm not important to them? We have to make sure that we are living what we promise. We are walking the talk within our organization. The other part of this that sometimes gets overlooked is, if we look at the employee journey, if we look at ways that we can really help our employees understand, communicate about, connect with customers so that they can deliver a better customer experience, that improves customer experience overall as well. And then the the reverse of that is also true, where if we deliver a great customer experience and we have happier customers and we have a more successful business, because that's what it leads to, we actually have happier employees. We become the employer of choice, which right now is so incredibly important as the great reshuffling, great resignation, whatever you call it, is happening. If we can be the employer of choice, that's going to reduce our hiring costs. That's going to give us employees who usually last longer, who do better at their jobs, all of those things. So it's all absolutely connected. And I think sometimes we overlook the way that it is. We put human resources over here, we put customer experience over there, and they don't really talk to each other. I really encourage you, if you are creating that cross-functional team, bring in your human resources leaders, bring in your learning and development leaders, because they are building the culture and the employee experience that you need to deliver on that customer experience. So there are so many ways that these absolutely have to support one another, and that we should be inviting those internal people leaders in our organizations into these bigger discussions about customer experience, because it absolutely drives everything.
We've got a question from Christopher. How do you bring HR with you on this? An appreciation of some of the conventional approaches to recruitment.
Yes, love this. So I have a couple different ideas on this. One is sometimes it's best to actually start with your learning and development team. And I say that because they are often responsible for, developing all the curricula for training within your organization. If you can pair up with them and really develop a great strategy around what do we want people to know, for instance, when they're going through onboarding with our organization, how can we get them to really understand our customer experience mission, how we define success, what we expect from them around customer experience, so it's not something that they hear about once and never hear about again. So sometimes it's best to start there, and I say that because they have more control sometimes over how we get this into the conversation. If you have a recruiting team, they want support. They want to do things well. They want to set up their candidates for success. So it's a matter of turning the conversation to that. You know what? We really want to make sure that every single person hired here is set up for success, and we're dedicated to customer experience. This is what we have. Use those foundational pieces, your mission statement, your success statement, and really make sure that that's the conversation. Because what happens is HR is often not included in strategic conversations when they should be. And they want a seat at the table. And in fact, in one organization that I worked with, they had a special session at a big event. And I spoke about the customer journey as it related to recruitment and the candidate experience. And I will tell you what, every single one of those people were really eager to learn more and to have more of a say in this. So I think sometimes it's a matter of inviting them into the conversation, but in certain organizations, especially large organizations, HR has many different layers, just like every other department. And so sometimes it's a matter of figuring out who would be more open to this, who has control over this. And that's why I say sometimes it helps to start with learning and development, because once you start developing that training, then you can start saying, you know what, we really need? We need people who are like this, or we need people with these skills, because that's all part of this. Then you can start backing up that conversation with recruitment, with head of HR, all of those things. But honestly, I think that there is so much eagerness to really be part of this conversation with everybody I've worked with in HR, but we have to put it into the context of what are they responsible for? Well, they're responsible for hiring. So if we can help them be more successful with that, then they're more apt to listen as we present these different ideas. But so much of CX is about building these coalitions, collaborating cross-functionally with different leaders. Invite HR folks to those cross-functional team, because they have a lot to do with this. If we want our employee survey to reflect our customer experience, we have to be working together on those things. So all of those things require a lot of coalition building as well. Now, once you have a mindset, that North Star, that alignment throughout your organization, you want to make sure that you understand what success looks like. This is where customer experience as a strategy is so important. This is not about something that's nice to have. This is about where you really define what is the return on the investment that you'll get for customer experience. What is the actual customer experience management that will take place? How are you setting goals and defining success? It's really something that is about what happens inside the organization, so that you set the right goals that you can achieve. And it's about guiding your customer experience teams and their efforts to get to that strategy. Again, we had some great questions from you.
I want to bring up a comment from Bill, who's joining us. who says, I hope we can agree to disagree. I think we do agree, though.
I think we do too.
Yeah, Bill says customer experience is all about the customer, not about us. The customer's paying for their experience, not ours. And we
Mhm.
need customer experience management.
Yep. That's exactly right, Bill. That's exactly what we're saying here. So we are totally in agreement. I
Yeah.
think sometimes what happens is we either start from inside the organization and what I call a customer journey by org chart, where we kind of force the customer through our processes that way. Or sometimes we say we're really invested in the customer, but we don't do anything with the feedback that they give us. We collect data and we don't actually deliver on the things that they actually want. So that's exactly right. It is all about the customer. However, we have to manage it from the inside because it's not magical. It's something that we have to apply business leadership to, we have to apply business insights to, and we really have to be disciplined about checking in with our customers and saying, "Hey, is this working for you? And if not, what do we do about it?" So all of that is true. So Bill, always good to see you here too. He's a special person in our world as well.
We've had another question from the community that I love because it's taking a perspective that we don't normally take. This question asks, they say, it seems like I have a poor experience with almost every business I deal with, and they don't seem to care. Do you have any advice on how, as a customer, I can provide better feedback to
Mm,
companies? And if we want to flip that, we can also
yeah.
kind of think about how, as companies, can we make it easier for customers to provide the right feedback or the most helpful feedback?
This is such a great question. Uh, so I think this really shines a light on how often feedback is gathered just for the sake of gathering it. And that's very frustrating for everybody. So one of the things I always recommend to organizations is you have to have a feedback strategy. That means you have to know what you're asking, why you're asking, how you're asking, and what you're going to do about it. Because otherwise you're wasting everybody's time. And I think many of us as customers have felt that. We literally are filling out surveys left and right and we never hear back and we never see movement. I've literally written in surveys. I know you're not reading this. I've said this 4 times, and that it just feels like you're yelling into a canyon. And so I think part of that is really understanding if you're creating a feedback strategy, we need to respect the customer's time and we need to know what the heck we're going to do about it. If we don't have an action plan for really understanding those insights and then acting on them, then it just becomes an exercise of collecting feedback for feedback's sake. And that doesn't do anybody any good. The flip side, the question you originally asked about how can you provide feedback that's more meaningful, a couple things I want to say there that it's a little different, but I think it's important. Right now, today, the world we're living in, there are so many customer service issues right now that everything has gone up. The ticket volume in every channel has gone up in almost every industry. That is for a lot of reasons that we're living through right now. But once somebody reaches that customer service agent or, the representative, a lot of times that representative is working in a place that is short-staffed, where they're not getting what they need, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing I would offer as a customer right now is to have a lot of compassion and empathy and start from there. Because even if you're waiting on hold for 2 hours, that means they've been dealing with all sorts of angry customers for at least that long. And so I think it's really important. Somebody commented on my LinkedIn article recently about this, and I thought it was a great point to start with compassion and empathy. Um, and I would also say, as a customer, if you're not hearing back, if you're not seeing those changes, then I'm not sure there's much you can do. They probably don't have their act together on the inside of the organization. They don't have that feedback strategy. I have seen a lot of organizations who treat feedback as if it's this ad hoc thing or if it's as if it's not part of the customer journey. To do this well, you need to understand your customer's journey and then kind of layer on the feedback journey on that and understand where and when and how you're gathering feedback and what you will do about it. Have an action plan before you ask those questions, because otherwise you are actually creating more negativity by just not responding, not closing the loop, all of those things. It happens again and again. So that's one piece of advice I would have.
We've got another question from Gabriella. She wants to know, how often do you believe that a strategy should be set? Every
Mhm.
6 months, every year, more frequently, less frequently?
Yeah, this is another one that kind of depends on the culture of your organization. But, we've talked about customer experience success statements here, and that's really setting the goals, the time bound goals. So those can be something that you use once a year. You can also do something where you say, okay, this is where we want to be in a year. This is where we want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then just revisit that and make sure you're kind of revising and updating as you go. But the strategy, the success definition, that can change and be time bound because maybe you achieve something, right? You get that team of your dreams and everybody's working really well, and now you're setting that next big goal. So those can change. Your mission should not change, your customer experience mission. And that's why I always recommend we start with a customer experience mission statement, because this is something that will be there for the long haul. This is something that is about how you show up for your customers and how you really make sure that they are um, uh, getting the brand promise that you delivered. And so the mission statement is the first piece, and then the success statement is the second. And the mission should drive that success statement. So every year, every 6 months, however you want to do it, you want to make sure that you're looking back on that mission statement and defining goals and success metrics around how are we living up to this mission? What can we do to live up to this mission? And make sure that you're connecting those dots whenever you revisit your strategy. Now, once you have a mindset and a strategy, it's all about the daily efforts that you have in your business. How do you make sure that you're taking the right steps every day, every week, every quarter to get to that strategy, to live that mindset? This is where we have to approach customer experience as a business discipline. It's about how do you actually measure that success with CX metrics? How do you understand your customers with things like customer journey mapping? And how do you really make sure that you are getting the right people involved at the right time with the right cadence? How are you leading those meetings and what are you expecting? It's all about the rigor and the governance and the discipline behind those actions to make sure that you can live up to the strategy and the mindset. This is where we get a lot of great questions. So we had to pick just a few.
We've got another question from Gabriella, and I really like this one because it focuses on the practical aspect of finding micro moments and using them. Should micro moments be captured on the journey itself and in the
Mhm.
customer journey map? I'm thinking it would be beneficial in order to align everyone, or would it be confusing? So I could see how, with so many micro moments, it could become overwhelming to list them all out
Yep.
on the journey map. But how do you?
Mhm.
What's the best way to share those and note them?
Um, Gabriella, you're getting a gold star because you're asking really good questions because these are really important issues. So here's how I think about it. First of all, when we talk about journey mapping, we have to remember that we have to narrow that down to why are we journey mapping. So we have a goal for a journey map, we have a scope for a journey map, and we have a kind of ideal of how we're communicating this out and how are we socializing this throughout the organization to make real change, to take action. So that's journey mapping. If you have a goal and a scope and you start realizing like, oh, holy cow, there's a bunch of micro moments in here that we could include, I would encourage you to take that one step further and do what we call micro mapping. And this is where you take one part of the journey and you really dig into what's happening. That's the power of where to put your micro moments, in my opinion. Now, if you find a micro moment that could be something that is applied throughout the journey, for example, we just talked about error messages. If there is a common error message that you find when you are really digging into one part of the journey and it's a micro moment, if you know that that can be applied throughout the rest of the journey, then of course you want to take the right action and include that throughout the whatever actions you're taking around the journey. But for the most part, it can be too much for an actual journey map. And that's why I like this idea of micro mapping. Micro mapping can be super small. We've done this for things like what's it like for somebody to call into a service center at a busy time and ask a simple question. What does that journey look like for the customer? So you can get very narrow in micro mapping. You can also think about it more, just like what we were talking about. Micro mapping could be something like, okay, I've ordered my groceries online. What is it like to pick up my groceries? And just narrow in on that and really go through every single touch point and every single interaction that can happen, and that's where you'll start uncovering those micro moments. So it's a little bit of a judgment call. How much do you want to share out? What's most important? Does it align with the goals of that journey mapping exercise? Are you trying to prove something? All of those things. But the way to find these, in my opinion, is to go deep on those micro mapping moments. And the way to find those are really looking at where are those pain points that we know about, where are those unknowns that we know about, and what do we need to know more about so that when you're looking at the overarching journey map, you say, oh, this, I'm going to flag this for micro mapping. Oh, I'm going to flag this for micro mapping. And then in that process, you'll probably uncover a lot of micro moments too.
So we've got a question coming in from all over here. So this is a question that I think a lot of people have. Gabriella, joining us on
Mm.
YouTube, asks, how often should these meetings take place? Olatoye on LinkedIn says, how frequent should these meetings be? So Jeannie, what is it? How often, how
Yeah.
frequent should these be? And maybe even how long should they be,
Mhm.
since we're asking people who maybe don't even have CX in their title to
Yep.
take on this extra accountability?
Yeah, great questions. And again, I wish I had a one size fits all answer, but I don't think there is one. The agenda that I put together for this article and for this session, I believe, is around 90 minutes. It's a meeting that I have seen work most effectively when if you're starting this meeting from scratch, you may want to create a shorter agenda and have more frequent meetings. So maybe you don't necessarily go through the entire priority list every time. You say, we're going to talk about these top 3 issues, but you meet weekly. That's a good way to get momentum going. But then once you have this well established, I've seen this work really well monthly, because then you can see the progress. To Christopher's point, you see the progress as you move forward, because you can get a lot done in a month versus a week. So monthly can work really well, but then it is usually about a 90-minute meeting. And then if you go to quarterly, which I've also seen, I'm not a huge fan of that, because it feels like you can forget a lot in 3 months, and things shift so quickly right now. So actually, I've been recommending to my clients that they start weekly with these, with again a shorter agenda, but a more frequent kind of cadence, so that everybody gets used to how these roll. And then you may want to go to every 2 weeks or even every month based on who's involved. When you have a cross functional team like this, schedules can be a real issue. So that's another thing to kind of navigate in your organization is, how much are we asking of people? There are some organizations that are really meeting heavy and there's just no window for this. And that's where you might want to go to like monthly and say, this is it. We are committing to this. There are others that are very light on meetings. And so you can maybe say, okay, let's check in once a week and then have the longer meeting every month. There are a couple different ways to do that. But again, it kind of impacts how much progress can you make in that month? How much do you want to get done? And if it's starting from scratch and this team hasn't worked together before, it's a good idea to do it more frequently so that you can build the relationships, build the trust, and eventually get to that place where there's enough accountability and trust between meetings where maybe you don't have to meet as often. So I wish I had a better answer, like the magic wand. You can do this, every month without a problem, but it depends on all of those factors. But if you're just starting out, I would say more frequently and shorter, and then build to that place where you can go less frequently and longer. Thank you so much to each of you who have asked questions throughout our live sessions. If you've never joined us for those live sessions, what are you waiting for? We would love for you to be part of this community. And those questions actually drive the content that we deliver. So let us know, what questions do you have? What would you like to see in these videos? And if you had already, please sign up for our newsletter to find out about when we have these live sessions, about twice a month. You can also find any of these archived sessions on YouTube at the link below. Thank you so much for all you bring to our community. When we talk about customer experience, it's such a big topic that we do our best to try to simplify it and empower you to make better decisions around the customer experience for your organization and to support you as a customer experience leader. We love hearing from you, so please do keep in touch and don't be afraid to take bold moves, explore different topics, and let us know how we can support you here at Experience Investigators. The mission of our company is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here and learning with us week after week, time after time, you all are helping us live that mission. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.